I'm Harriet Connolly. My maiden name was McGlennon. I moved to South Orange when I was 11 years old after my father died. No, 13, I guess, after my father died. And we moved to South Orange because that was where my mother had her home.
And what did you spend most of your time doing in South Orange?
I went to school, Columbia High School, and then I went to New York University to college. Came back. I taught in Maplewood Junior High School for a year, and I taught in Harrison High School for a year. And then the war was over and I got married.
How'd you meet your husband?
That's debatable. He told me he met me at my aunt's house on Walton Road. They had a tennis court in the backyard, and he said he had met me there. But he knew all of my cousins and my sister.
And tell us about your husband and his relationship to the community.
My husband was Mr. South Orange at times. He grew up, I guess he was maybe 5 when he moved to South Orange. He'd grown up in Oakland Road and Maplewood for a little while, and then they moved to South Orange and eventually settled on Comstock Place, which is where the senior citizen housing is now. He went to Seton Hall Prep, went to Our Lady of Sorrows, Seton Hall Prep, and then went into business with his father. His father had established a real estate firm in 1907. It was originally in East Orange, and then I moved over to South Orange, and I'm not sure the date, before my time. And he was a prominent realtor in the Board of Realtors of the Oranges and Maplewood, was one of the founders of it, was the second president of it, and was very active in establishing multiple listing. He had originally, his father, had an office in East Orange and got very annoyed at all the signs on the buildings. We had 3 or 4 realtors selling the same building. And finally they got together and decided to have one person put up a sign and the rest of them would cooperate with them. And that's really how multiple listing started and spread pretty much from this area. We were one of the first to have had it. So my husband went into business with him. Was very active in South Orange Field Club, in Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, which was then called the South Orange Businessmen's Association, and was extremely active in the Board of Realtors.
Name of the agency?
Raymond Connolly Realtors. And they were in business for close to 80 years before we closed.
So in 1929, I understood that the Rotary was having a movie made about it. Do you know anything about that?
1929? No, I don't.
I've been trying to search that out for some time, by a Samuel Grosso, who was a professional photographer in Melbourne.
A movie made of...
Making it a movie about the various businesses in South Orange and
29?
Maplewood.
No, I don't know. Ted Lowy might know something about it. Have you
I will ask Ted
contacted him?
Lowy that. He's been around a while too, huh?
Mhm.
So, you graduated high school from Columbia High School, and what year was that?
37.
All right. And then you went on to have children.
Yes.
How many kids did you have?
I have 4 children, a daughter and 3 sons, and I have 25 grandchildren.
And a very full life in South Orange. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit also about what you were involved with personally in South Orange.
Well, before we leave Herb. Do you have anything about the South Orange Field Club?
I know a little bit about the field club. I know that it was a private club, and I know that Meadowlands Park was the land for the
yes.
field club.
And it was a golf course.
Right.
And a group of men that bought it originally, Field Club, and set it up, did it to prevent the spread of the hatting industry that was very active in the Orange along the branch of the Royaway River there, along the brook. They didn't want that to spread to South Orange, and they were anxious to keep some South Orange land open. So the South Orange Field Club owned it. And then it became the community center. Then and at one point Herb was treasurer of it, and Bill Baird was chairman. And Bill Baird retired, and Herb became president and chairman of the community center. And about probably around in the 70s somewhere, in South Orange there were two sets of programs going. The community center ran their own programs of baseball or whatever, and the Village of South Orange Recreation Department ran similar programs. And Herb and Bud Conlon was president of the village at the time. They were very interested in merging because they felt they could put on a better program together. So the community center, my husband is president, sold the field club building, community center building, to the Village of South Orange for $1. And then it became one department, and the recreation board took over. Herb was on that too.
Very actively involved in all kinds of community affairs, which was characteristic of the businessmen of the era, is that
some of them.
Well, and a large number from my experience, and the time given for recreation for children, for...
The businessmen will sponsor the Little League teams, basically. And Bill Baird was very philanthropic toward the community center, and was rightly named after him. He deserved it. He lived on Bridgewood Road, just on the corner of the driveway going up to Orange Lawn.
Big, beautiful. It's a sort of stone brick type of home. It's brown. It's
Brick.
brick.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the one on the left going up.
And did you know Anna Bayard Grant? Was that a relative of
No, I
his?
didn't know them.
Okay.
I knew Bill, but not well.
Now he was also involved in a large corporation, U.S. Rubber, I think, in New York. He was a philanthropist. He was one of the men in the community that was a philanthropist. But I also know that your husband contributed tremendous amounts of time.
Time, yes.
Tremendous amounts of time.
I loved every minute of it.
And you also were a giver of time. And can you tell us how you gave your time and how many years you did the work that you've done to benefit the citizens of South Orange?
Well, I don't know if it was a benefit to the citizens of South Orange, but I thoroughly enjoyed every minute I did. I did the usual den mother, PTA, active in the school association, and I was involved in the beginning of the library at Our Lady of Sorrows School, and ran that as a volunteer, and not a professional librarian. But we managed, and we ran the library there I did it for about 10 or 12 years. And then I was invited to be on the board at South Orange Public Library by Bud Conlon. It was his appointment. And that I loved doing. stayed pretty active in that and raised my children and then mother and whatnot.
Well, as the president of the board of the library, though, you oversaw some expansion of library services and changes.
The new library had been built by the time I went on the board, but we did increase hours, we did increase staff, had a very active children's room, and just as I left, the last thing we did before I retired was put in a computer system.
You helped propel us into the 20th century, right?
We were very fortunate in our two most recent librarians, Tony Merkel and Elaine Clark. Elaine Clark has been excellent in her job.
Do you, you can just tell us a little bit about, I guess, what it felt like growing up and then being married to someone who was in prominence within civic life. How did that feel for you?
I don't know that it felt anything but normal. My father had been active in politics and had been a superintendent of schools, had been a state senator, had been a congressman, and when he died he had been a judge at the Court of Errors and Appeals. So that public service to me was natural.
And part of what you were supposed to do.
I don't know that I was supposed to do it, but I think everybody should do some of it. And of course, half life in town was politics for a good many years.
Where did you spend most of your time outside of the library?
Home. And then when my husband died in 1979, the office, we had two offices, one in South Orange and one in Milburn. And the staff wanted to keep the office open. So I went into the office and had two excellent managers. We ran the office for, I guess, about 8 years, 9 years. No, longer than that. We closed it just before, a couple of years before I came down here. We closed about 8 years ago.
Tell us the area that you lived in South Orange. You mentioned your husband was on Comstock, but I don't know that you mentioned where you spent your time.
I lived on Kingston Terrace. I moved there when I was 13. And it was a small house, typical. And lived there. My mother died during the war. And so when Herb came home from service and we got married, we just decided to stay there. We stayed there till probably around 1860s, maybe. And bought a bigger house on Hillside Place. Partly to be near the park and recreation because the boys spent a lot of time down there.
And I know Hillside has some interesting stories. I heard that there were some, I believe Alger Hiss's brother lived on Hillside.
That I don't know.
Yeah, and that I heard that he concocted some of his interesting plots on Hillside.
I don't know that.
There was a famous gynecologist who lived on Hillside. And that street had quite a few prominent people on it, actually. Do you remember any of your neighbors on Hillside?
Turnbull's. Shelby Brask was not too far away. Tymosons.
What do you think is important to share for future generations about South Orange and at least your time and place in the community so that kids are aware of the uniqueness of this town?
I think they have to get involved in things, be part of the town, give of your time, and the more time you give, the more interest you have in the town. As I said, we spend much time politically in town. I ran for office one time and I lost. But maybe that was just as well. But it gave you a whole insight into the town. And there were many things that South Orange did that were so far ahead of themselves, and yet later on became a problem, like with cable. Since we didn't have any overhead wires in the street with the gas lamps, it took a long time before cable came to South Orange. And they finally got it through the backyards. But that was a hassle because we wanted to give property rights. So, you asked me earlier about the houses. My mother was born in what was the township of South Orange, was Maplewood on Ridgewood Road. And she was born in September, and her family had come up to spend the summer there, and they did that every summer. They came from Newark and vacationed in South Orange. And you had asked me about the houses. There were only two that I remember her telling me about. One was the Campbell House, which was a house on the corner of Rinda Road and Ridgewood, just at the bend there. And Piper built some new houses on the front lawn. They eventually tore the house down. But on the map I was telling you about, how accurate that map was. The house was an octagon-shaped house. And on that map, I've forgotten the man's name now, that drew it. The house there on that plot of land is an octagon-shaped house. The other house was the Hart House. And that was on Hart Drive, still there. Was the last I knew. And that, I can remember my mother telling me that they would sit on the porch or stand out in front of the house, and you could look from the top of the street there. There was no street, it was South Orange Avenue to get into it. You could look down into the town and see where the horse and carriage were. And if you'd forgotten to order something at the butcher store or the grocery store, why, you could call down and tell whoever was doing the shopping to do it. So the trees have grown quite a bit there. Then, what was I going to say?
Also, you knew the area a little bit over in Montrose, a little bit.
Montrose was one of the earliest sections of town developed, and it was developed by mostly New Yorkers that came out here by train. And as a matter of fact, South Orange and Maplewood both developed a lot on the train, the layout of the train, because it was easy access. The development of Tuxedo Park, on the other hand, was developed in probably 1910s, in that period, by two men, Mr. Crowley and O'Brien, John O'Brien, who later became the village tax assessor. They built Tuxedo Park, and they were catering mostly to Newark executives, because that was the end of the city line, and the trolley came up there, and it was very handy to get back and forth to Newark to work. That was part of
You also have a relative who lived over on Stanley Road, who some people know about. Tell us about that.
Well, Stanley Road, 66 Stanley Road, was my mother's home. Her mother moved there after she became a widow. And my mother's family had 10 children, and only 3 of them were left living at home when they moved to Stanley Road. They had, my mother was married in 1912, so the house should have been sold, according to my grandmother's will then. But the Smiths lived there, and they grew up there, and my Aunt Jo stayed there. And they had 6 boys and a girl. The oldest boy was Tony Smith, who was a world-class sculptor. He was a very good architect, too. Studied with Frank Lloyd Wright originally. But they stayed there and lived there until his children grew up. And they bought a place in Berkeley Avenue, Orange, and commuted back and forth.
One of the interesting things to me that I discovered in this process is that people stick around. People's parents live in a house, they continue to receive the house as part of an estate or a small estate, and the kids stay, and then the grandchildren, and they may go away, but they come back. Did you ever have any desire to leave the
South Orange?
community?
No.
Tell
Except
us.
my children left, so that as I grew older, they wanted me to come. My daughter wanted me to come and stay near her. And by that time, I guess it was time to go. Most of my friends.
To a new adventure. It was time for a new adventure. What do you think separates the people in South Orange from some of the others you've come across through business in your lifetime?
Well, I think all us old timers really loved the town, and it was small enough to be part of it. And your life centered on your children, the Little League, and you saw the same people at Little League, at church, at PTA meetings or whatnot. And I don't know, I just always loved the town. So
It's been my impression that some of it has to do with the person implementing a religious belief into daily life. That there's something unique about the quality of person in that community, and always has been. You were very involved in your church life. You were pretty involved in the church life.
somewhat, not as much as the town.
But you took principles from your religious belief and believing that you gave back, you worked hard.
Well, I was fortunate that I could do it. And working around, particularly in the school, I spent a lot of time volunteering in the school. But that was as much my own convenience, too, because I could be there during the day and I'd be home when the kids got out of school. So.
And what's your memory of the history of the development of Our Lady of Sorrows Church? Because you were pretty involved with them for some time. No?
I know the new church was built in '29, I think, or finished around there. So the new church was up when I moved. As I said, my mother had been born on Ridgewood Road, and was now Maplewood. And there were no churches in the area at that time. And she was born in September. And of course, the practice of Catholicism in those days was that you baptize the baby immediately or within 2 weeks. So she was baptized at Seton Hall Chapel, which was the only church around. She was married at Our Lady of Sorrows, St. Mary's, and I have never been able to find that. Monsignor Fields had some information on it, but he never was too definitive with me. when Sorrows became Sorrows and not St. Mary's. But there used to be a church on Academy Street, Wooden Church.
Wooden Church, the original Sorrels Church
Which is-
on Wooden Church.
Which was where my mother was married. So,
And tell us a little bit about your mom's history. You were showing us some photographs here.
well, as I said,
About
my
your mom.
mother was born in, and her family moved, her mother moved to South Orange shortly after her father died. Mother finished St. Elizabeth's. She should say that she went to St. Elizabeth's Academy for 4 years. She went to the college for 4 years. And she was in the first graduating class. There were 4 of them. And so this is the 100th anniversary year of college, as a matter of fact. She finished in 1903. And spent her time traveling, visiting family, taking care of children. And then in 1912 she was married to, his name was C.A. McGlennon, who was a teacher, became superintendent of schools in Harrison, was a state senator, and was a U.S. congressman at the right time, lost in the Harding landslide. But he believed in the right things. Women's suffrage and League of Nations and anti-prohibition too.
I want to personally thank him for that. And
And women's suffrage passed only by 1 vote. His was not the decisive vote, but if he hadn't been voting, it would have been.
and there is a photo of the suffragette parade through South Orange. I recall that was in the town hall. It's pretty interesting to me. But there was a women's temperance union at one point on, I think, on South Orange Avenue, which then became a post office. So I think that movement was alive and well in our area. You're also, so the McCabe family, let's see, your mom was Harriet Seton McCabe.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that
The McCabe family.
relationship.
My grandfather, Owen McCabe, came from Ireland in pre-Civil War and got a job in Newark with a Boilermaker and eventually owned the factory. And it was just below Penn Station. And Monsignor Field tells me he has a piece down in the Smithsonian Institute, but I don't know about that. But he was very active in community affairs and church affairs down there. I was fairly young when he died, so I don't know.
I'm supposed to tell you from somebody by the name of Leslie Gilman, hello, H. Leslie Gilman, who was involved with you in setting up the art shows for many years.
Oh, okay.
Tell us a little bit about that, because that was sort of something not closely akin to the library, but you were involved in doing arts in South Orange
You
for
want to
some
take a little break?
Yes.
Have a drink?
Oh,
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you needing to do that? See, you're good at that, Mary Kay. I would have just
Well,
kept
actually,
talking.
His wife was my closest friend.
Yes. Well, we know. I see the kids around. Like Chris
Chris
is a
is around.
carpenter
Mm-hmm.
and does a lot of work.
Elaine told me he was doing work in the library.
Mm-hmm.
And
Very bright family.
one is married to the fireman. Isn't that stupid? I can't think of her name.
I know who you're talking about. Doesn't she live in Maplewood?
No, she lives on the corner of
I need you to be quiet 1 second, Harriet, and look right at me, okay? Mary Kay, can you do it? Can you leave her alone for a minute, please? Okay. Thank you, ladies.